Recently, I saw a YouTube short video that was taken from a podcast where the host of the podcast was asking the guest if you could only do 10 exercises for the rest of your life, what are the 10 exercises that you would do? And today I want to explain to you why these top 10 lists of 10 exercises that build the most muscle, the only 10 exercises you need, 10 exercises to do for the rest of your life, all of these are bad. They're not necessarily useless, but they're bad for a lot of people. And you know why? Because you know what the top comment was under this video? Now I got my full body routine from a YouTube short. That is exactly the problem with the whole thing. You cannot just take 10 exercises. A lot of the times when you say, okay, these are the 10 exercises that you can do for the rest of your life, what would you do? And then they say 10 exercises. Some people take it literally and they're like, okay, now these are the 10 exercises that I will do for the rest of my life. But you don't need to only do 10 exercises for the rest of your life. It's a hypothetical scenario. And as it seems, it's not a useful one. Or at least it's not really a good one. This one is not even useful. Some other top 10 exercise themes are useful, but they're still not a list of only the exercises that you should do. Like, you can do other exercises as well, but some of them are not even useful and are actually, exercises that if you only do those, they will make your physique worse in reality. So that's why I wanted to talk about this today. And I'm going to start with what we started with, which is you can only do 10 exercises for the rest of your life. How do you even choose the 10 exercises? The person who was in this podcast who had to answer the question was clearly not thinking the way that I am thinking, because the first thing that comes to mind, if I can only do 10 exercises for the rest of my life, is overuse injuries. I have to pick exercises that I can spam forever, because these are the only 10 that I can use for the rest of my life. So realistically, my options are I either do the exercises that are the most joint friendly, most spammable, you can do them forever, which no matter what exercise we're talking about, if you're going to lift for several decades, let's say you're, 30 right now, and you're going to live until you're 70, you're going to lift for another 4 years, or are you not? Are you going to stop lifting? No. So you're going to want to lift for the next 40 years. Do you think that doing the same fucking exercise for the next 40 years is eventually down the line not going to cause problems? It obviously will. It does not matter how joint friendly it is, how safe it is, how spammable it is. You cannot do the same exercise for 40 years. It's not possible. So that's why it's such a fucking bullshit. And also because what you learn from this, if the person actually takes the whole thing correctly, is which exercises are spammable, but they're not necessarily the best exercises. And also, you don't necessarily need spammable exercises in your program. They're sometimes good to have, for sure, to get in some extra volume. But for an example, like if we're talking about legs, probably leg extension is the most spammable, but is leg extension going to get your legs the biggest? No. When we're talking about triceps, yeah, sure, push downs are really good and everything, but if you don't do any long head work, the push downs aren't really that good of a movement, okay? They're fine, sure, but if you only do push downs for the rest of your life because they're spammable, don't expect to get the best tricep gains, alright? And especially if you don't even think about that, if you don't think about the longevity, there's really no point in it anymore. If you just think about, I can only do 10 exercises, I want to get the max out of them, so I will choose exercises that I think are really good, you're going to get fucked in the first year, bro. You can't do the same exercises every single week, probably twice, because you're going to realistically train twice, at least, every single muscle group, hopefully, and it just does not work, okay? So, for an example, another problem that I have with this whole spammability issue is the kind of exercises that you will pick. So when it comes to biceps, for an example, I personally would pick as the best bicep exercise, like if I could only do one bicep exercise to get my biceps as big as possible and overuse injuries do not exist, I would pick a preacher curl, because I personally think that that's probably the best movement that I have completely in my program, and I really love them. And you can also adjust the incline, so it's pretty good. It can become quite spammable if you're allowed to adjust the incline, if you're allowed to change it. I do that, and that way I am able to do it every single week once for 4 sets, and I always use a different incline. So 1 week I will use a higher, 1 week I will use a lower. But still, you cannot spam them forever, okay? Eventually, you get some overuse. Like right now, I am dealing with some wrist pain, which is, when that happens, what I do is I just switch to a hammer grip on all of my bicep movements for 2-3 weeks, and then I get back to my normal movements. It just happens. That's it. But people, for some reason, do not take that into account. But when it comes to the preacher curl, it's not really that much of a spammable movement for sure. Because if you choose any good movement, it's probably going to be lengthen biased, and the lengthen biased movements are probably not going to be the movements that are going to be very, very friendly on your joint. On the other hand, what would I choose if I would have to do just that for the rest of my life, and I would have to actually consider overuse injuries? I would probably pick a hammer curl, which some people would argue is not even a bicep exercise, but that doesn't give me any wrist pain ever, and I never really get any overuse injuries from that ever, so I could probably spam that for a really long time without ever experiencing any problems. But is that going to be the best movement for my biceps? No. So as you can see, this list is not that useful to begin with, and I don't even understand why you would try to do 10 exercises only for the rest of your life. The question is not even good. Now, what would I do if I could only do 10 exercises for the rest of my life? Honestly, I would probably not even try to hit my whole body. I would just pick 5 body parts, let's say, that I really care about, and I would just say, okay, fuck the rest. I'm just going to train those 5 body parts and then pick 2 exercises for each, because that's how limited it is. And also, just something that I want to outline is the amount of body parts you have. You can't even really have an exercise for each of them. Like when you look at your body, personally, the main muscle groups that I would say I am training separately, or I'm going to go from top to bottom: neck, shoulders, back, chest, abs, biceps, triceps, forearms. That's already 8. Calves, quads, hamstrings, that's 11. How are you going to train that with 10 exercises, huh? And some people like to train glutes and shit, so I didn't even include that. So how do you want to train all of these with just 10 exercises? Now, I know some people will come and, oh, you don't need to train your neck, you don't need to train your forearms. Why? If you want a shit physique, sure, but what we're trying to do is to build a physique that stands out, not to just get shit done with as few exercises as possible. That just does not make any sense. And even of those muscle groups that I said, some of them aren't really one muscle group. Like the back, for example, there's so many muscles in the back. There's a lower back that are pretty much completely separate from your upper back. And then even in your upper back, there are going to be movements that are going to target your lats more, and then other movements that are going to target your traps more. And that's why some people are trap dominant and some people are lat dominant. I am more lat dominant, so I guess I could maybe get away from now on with only doing trap dominant movements, but it's still really not that good. And when it comes to shoulders, that's actually 3 muscle groups now. I don't believe that you have to train all 3 of them every single time that you train shoulders, because they overlap to a certain degree, but still, at least you need to have some sort of pushing movement, some sort of overhead press. and with that paired some sort of either lateral raise or rear. Well, I'm not a fan of rear that flies, but you can do something like a Powell raise or a Y raise. I guess if I would have to do only one exercise for the whole part, I would do a rear delt exercise, because the rear delt exercise sort of overlaps more with the side delt than vice versa. But still, we're already at like, what, 14 muscle groups? So how the fuck do you plan on training them with only 10 exercises? Now let's move on to another iteration of this whole thing. 10 exercises that built me the most muscle. This is another one that does not really make a lot of sense, and this is one that sounds so good because you obviously want to build as much muscle as possible, but as soon as you learn which exercises these are, you're gonna be like, fuck that shit. You know why? Because they're gonna be leg exercises. Guess what? The exercises that are going to build you the most muscle are gonna be the exercises that are going to target the biggest muscles in your body. Because when they grow the most. Okay? So, just realistically, your quads naturally can probably get up to like 30 inches for, maybe not for most people, but at least 28 for most people. Your arms can get up to at least 17 for most people, I think. And with that in mind, which do you think is going to build more muscle? A bicep or a tricep exercise, or some sort of quad or hamstring exercise? The answer is pretty fucking obvious. All of these exercises that you would put in a video like this are going to be mainly for legs, glutes, back. Those are the ones that I would say, maybe chest, maybe, but probably not. And that's why the other muscles, the smaller muscles that you would just use isolation exercises for, something like a bicep curl or a JM press for your triceps or anything like that, they're going to get completely neglected. Long cut of the triceps, what is that for? That does not build you the most muscle possible. Or why even do lateral raises? They do not build you the most muscle possible. However, at the same time, they are the ones that will make your physique pop. Brother, if you will only train with the exercises that will build you the most muscle, so something like deadlifts, squats, rows, shit like that, you're going to look fucking dumb. You're going to look terrible because you're going to have a spider physique, so no arms. Calves are not going to exist. Your abs, where are your abs going to be? So that's very problematic in my opinion. And again, these are the muscles that will make your physique pop. It doesn't really matter how much muscle you build on a pound-to-pound basis. What matters more is where you build it. And so that's why I came with an example for you, because there are muscles that will make you look big, and then others that I guess don't really matter as much. They obviously still matter, but you would probably want to build some muscle more in your bicep area than in, I don't know, your leg area. So I will give you an example. Go, if you have a girlfriend, go to her right now and ask her what she wants more. To lose 5 pounds from her abs, or like from her, waist area, or 10 pounds from her ass and tits. Or if you don't have one, just imagine that you have one. What would you like more? I think the answer is pretty obvious. No person will ever choose the second option, even though it's more pounds of fat lost. It matters a lot where you lose the fat from. And the same comes with muscle. Building, I would much rather build 1 pound of muscle on my arms than 2 pounds of muscle on my legs. Obviously, I want to build muscle everywhere, but realistically, what is going to make your physique more aesthetic? Building, let's say, 5 pounds of muscle in your arms, shoulders, abs, or building 10 pounds of muscle in your quads, hamstrings, glutes, back. The answer is the first one. Obviously, it depends a little bit on what kind of physique you have already. So if you have complete chicken legs, yeah, sure, maybe the second one will be a little bit better. But for most people, the arms are not a very strong area. The legs are probably not either. But anyways, training the smaller muscle groups are what are actually going to make your physique pop, especially because everybody has a shit physique now because you don't train them because of all the years of powerlifting dogma that was pushed on us. Now, the next one is top 10 lifts that built my physique. I think this is probably one of the best ones because this actually makes sort of sense. It doesn't really try to say like the only 10 lifts that built my physique or anything. It's more so just lifts that you really like, that you think have built your physique a lot. By the way, just one more thing that I forgot at the previous one. Do you know what my number one exercise would be that have built me the most muscle? Low bar squat. Do you think I do low bar squat now? Our spoiler, no. You know why? Because it's not a good movement. Okay? The reason why I'm not saying like RDL or something is because for a real long time I didn't do them, and I only started doing them like I think 2 years ago, so I wasn't really doing any hip hinge variation, no deadlifts, none of that shit, which I regret obviously. But I did the low bar squat for the longest, and it's the biggest movement that I've had, and now I'm not doing it anymore because it's not a good movement for the quads. But still, that was the movement that has built me the most muscle. Now, back to the current topic, top 10 lifts that built my physique. This is pretty good. So, I don't necessarily have a lot of problems with this one, but still, a lot of people are going to say like, okay, these are now 10 lifts that I must do, or, oh, maybe I can just get by with just doing these 10 lifts or whatever. And, you know, realistically, you built your physique with more than 10 lifts. You built your physique with probably more than 20 lifts. The reason why your physique looks the way it looks now is because of all those years of training and because of all those exercises that you did. Every single one of them matter. Now, there's probably ones that were really shit and you wouldn't necessarily want to include here, but a lot of them also matter. Like if I would say right now, top 10 lifts that built my physique, like again, one of them would be a low bar squat. I don't do them anymore, so it also depends a lot on what you did for a long time, by the way, and not necessarily on what is a great movement. But I couldn't just list 10 movements. I would probably list like 30 because I am doing still a lot of movements because I think it's useful to do more movements. Minimalism doesn't lead anywhere. The next one. This is probably the best one. Rebuild my physique with only 10 lifts. Now, this is very, very similar to the you can only do 10 lifts for the rest of your life. So I guess maybe this is not the best one after all. But also this is trying to rebuild the physique that you currently have. So if you would start from zero today, how would you rebuild the physique that you currently have again as quickly as possible? And most people tend to pick movements here that are actually good and not necessarily ones that are very spammable, but they have to be somewhat spammable too. So it does not really make a lot of sense, but at least it's not just all about spammability. But again, you can't, most of the people that have made these videos, they probably can't even rebuild, you couldn't even rebuild their physique with only 10 exercises. I definitely couldn't rebuild mine. And one of the people who did this video, I think, was GVS. I'm pretty sure he couldn't rebuild his current physique with only 10 exercises. I mean, that's pretty obvious to everybody because of the overuse injuries, but even if those do not exist, like, he's so big in so many areas that you just need more than 10 exercises for that, because again, you have a lot more body parts. So the last one is going to be, and this is the worst one because this is not even trying to be something good. This is just plainly the only 10 exercises you need. If you've never seen any of these videos, you're fucking lucky. I can guarantee you that. But they do exist, and some people do actually market their shit this way. They say, oh, these are the only 10 exercises you need. And, you know, I have seen stuff on these lists like sumo deadlifts, because they also train the quads and they also train the hamstrings and all of that. Like, what? What? Sumo deadlifts is like one of the worst fucking movements that I can come up with for hypertrophy. It is literally, it has been made to lift the most amount of weight possible. Do you think that that is going to be good for hypertrophy? No, because it's going to, yes, use a lot of muscles, but it's not going to train any of them well. Alright? So, sumo deadlifts for hypertrophy? No. This one is the fucking worst. 100%. You cannot get by with doing only 10 exercises. Minimalism, I'm not saying doesn't lead anywhere, it does lead somewhere. To a shit physique. Alright? You need to be maximalist. You don't necessarily need to do every single exercise under the sun. You don't need to have 100 exercises in your program, and you don't need to do fucking 5 exercises per day for every single muscle group. However, have some variety. One of the reasons why variety is so good is because something like a tricep push down and a tricep extension, they both train the triceps, but they're completely different. Something like a shrug and something like a row and something like an RDL and something like a pull-up, they're 4 back movements. All of them are back. Maybe the RDL you could say is not a back movement, but it's a hamstring, but it's also back. But both, like all 4 of them, train your back in completely different ways. So why would you only do one of them? It does not make any sense. So just do more exercises than 10. Please, you don't need to do, again, a lot of exercises. But you also, first of all, need some variety, because a lot of exercises that hit the same muscle are just different. They hit the same muscle differently in a different way. And then on top of that, overuse injuries eventually come. If you keep hammering the same exercise all the time, eventually you will get injured. That's just the way the human body works, unfortunately. We're not supposed to be people who are just doing the same shit every single day, just the same movement all the time. We're supposed to be complex machines that are doing all sorts of weird movements. That's why your body can move in all sorts of ways. It can move like this, not just like this and like this, okay? It can move like this. So that's why doing the same shit is going to lead to injury, and you need some variety so that before that comes, you can change the movement, and that way you can start off fresh with another movement, and that way you will avoid getting overuse injuries. Easy as that. So I hope you have learned something from this. If you like this video, click here to watch my last one, and bye bye.